Welcome to Capital Dateline Online. I'm with our guest, Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Well, Jim, there's a court case that's happening this week for the scholarship credit program. It's a voucher program, essentially, and whether or not it is constitutional.
Yeah, there's very few issues in Florida's education system that are more controversial than school vouchers. And the state has had this program for years called the Tax Credit Scholarship Program. And essentially it allows corporations can donate money to organizations that then in turn send children to private schools. And those corporations get tax credits. Essentially, it's a voucher program, but just a little bit different flavor. The Florida Education Association, the big teachers union in the state, has been fighting this program for years and argues that it's unconstitutional. So there are arguments this week in the First District Court of Appeal in a legal challenge that's been ongoing that the FEA union has been leading. The supporters of the program won at the circuit court level. And essentially that ruling was not really on the constitutionality of it, it was more on whether the opponents had the legal standing to bring the case. But the broad issue is constitutional. Years ago, Jeb Bush, when he was governor, is a big supporter of school choice, and he tried to have a straight out voucher program. And the FEA and others fought that in court and wound up winning that it's a ruling that it was unconstitutional. And so they're taking a similar tack in this case to try to get the tax credit scholarship program tossed out. Part of the issue is, from their perspective, that they argue that this program is essentially siphoning money away from the public school system and sending it to private schools. Quite often religious private schools. But on the other side, they're saying, tax credits are not the same as a direct payment from the state treasury to these programs, to allow these students to take part in these programs. So it's a very high profile issue and has been for years. And I mean, school choice is a major battleground in the education world and in the legislature. It goes to private schools, it goes to charter schools. There's all kinds of legislation that came up during this year's session on school choice. And we'll probably be hearing about it a lot going forward as well. We don't know when the appeals court's going to rule on this. It typically takes them some time, but it's a big case.
And let's also talk about, we have I guess it's not even a presumptive nominee, but a nominee for the Republican presidential spot, and that's Donald Trump. How's that going to affect Florida?
Well, there's so many ways to answer that question, I guess.
Okay, let's go through all of them.
Well, I don't know if I can deal with that. But, what we're seeing in Florida is somewhat of a microcosm of what's going on nationally with this response to Trump. But there's one thing that's more important about Florida than in most states, is that Florida is pivotal in every presidential race. Right. And if Hillary Clinton wants to be president, she's going to need to win Florida. And Donald Trump would need to win Florida. So, there's going to be more attention on how Florida reacts to the Trump nomination. We saw last week, former Governor Bush came out pretty strongly and said that he would not vote for Donald Trump. He won't vote for Hillary Clinton either. But he and other sort of establishment figures in Florida, Republican politics, are not happy that Trump is the nominee. The question going forward, I think, is what does that mean for regular voters? I mean, the establishment has been against Donald Trump throughout this entire campaign, but yet, when it came time for the primary in Florida, he won 66 of the 67 counties. Mm-hmm. You look demographically across the state, the counties are, not uniform in terms of income, rural, urban, so on. The only county he lost was Miami-Dade to Marco Rubio, who lives in Miami-Dade. So, the question going forward, I think, is whether the opposition from the establishment really is going to hurt Trump among rank and file voters, particularly those who he's turned out this year.
And how is it going to affect fundraising?
Well, that's another big question. I mean, Jeb Bush saying that last week, that he's not going to vote for Trump, sort of sends the message to all those people out there who raised more than $100 million for Jeb Bush's presidential campaign, that, hey, it's okay to turn off the spigots to Donald Trump. But, Trump has money. He's not going to spend it all on this race, but he does have money. The other interesting thing that's kind of happened in the last couple election cycles is that online donations in small amounts can build up a lot. We've seen that with Bernie Sanders
yes.
this year. Barack Obama was a master at that, and so I don't know whether Trump can grab that and bring in the $50 donations, from all across the country. But fundraising is a little bit different game than it used to be, and so there's a lot of questions. I think that at this point, to underestimate Donald Trump is a little bit dangerous for either side, really. I mean, he has broken through the expectations every single time for the last, again, 8 months, how far you want to go back. I mean, last summer people were predicting he would drop out of the race before the primaries even started. Then he ran through them. So I think it's a little bit dangerous on both sides to underestimate him.
Now we have a race now with two people, we presume at this point, that have very high negatives.
Well, that's the other thing, is that Hillary Clinton does have, her negatives are not as high as Trump's, but they're pretty high. And Republicans have been essentially vilifying her for 25 years. So, will they turn out and vote for Trump even if they don't like him because they don't like her? That's an issue. I do think there's some built-in benefits for her in Florida. She's going to have a strong base among women voters, particularly in South Florida, loyal Democratic voters, women who are really energized by the idea of having a woman in the White House. I also think that, it's going to be interesting to see how Hispanic voters and African American voters, if they turn out in large numbers for her. Obviously, Trump has said a lot of things that have turned off Hispanic voters. And will they turn out, particularly in not only in South Florida, but in Central Florida, where in the Orlando area, a lot of the Puerto Rican population has grown immensely in recent years, and they're very strong Democrats. Will they turn out? That's going to be a big issue. So, like I said, there's a lot of questions going forward. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
And the VP picks too.
Well, I mean, Governor Scott's saying he's not that interested in it, but everybody kind of says that. So,
Thanks, Jim. For more news about government and public affairs, visit the Advances section of our website and keep coming back to CapitolDatelineOnline.com for daily postings.